जागने वाले किसी बांग दरा से दिल हो. The UN International Commission of Inquiry under the Human Rights Council has declared this a genocide now. ICJ is an arm of United Nations, and Professor Norman Finkelstein continuously looks at what ICJ is saying. Will ICJ follow suit after this?
Well, Finkelstein's done amazing work on both of those courts. He's written a book about this. He delved deeply into the health and independence of these organizations when no one else was
Yeah.
sensitive to them and looking at whether there's a stitch up there. So he's an expert on that. What I want to say about that topic is because I follow, if you like, the world through the UK lens as a UK voting citizen. We had Herzog in the UK. This is the president of Israel, somewhat ceremonial, come to the UK on a visit ahead of Palestinian recognition by the UK. And many people felt this guy should be arrested because he said that they're all complicit in Gaza. There's no innocence. It's a whole society that's behind October the 7th terrorist attack, and therefore we're going to go for all of them. And so that is at least incitement to genocide, and as a head of state, although he may not have sort of governing power, people say, well, he should at least be interrogated about it. Instead, we saw him welcomed in, handshakes and all the rest, smiles and all the rest of it, which speaks to where we are at in terms of Genocide Convention, complicity, criminal liability, and how the European allies, Israel's friends, may or may not show increasing sensitivity to the Genocide Convention and their own complicity. So what we've seen is, just a few weeks ago, the UK literally shaking hands. And their justification is what? The justification is we don't give up on diplomacy. In other words, we're working hard to talk to the Israelis again to try and get an end to the genocide, rather than let's arrest these people, sort of defund them, stop arming them, and isolate them so that they feel some actual power. So it's amazing PR to use this line. We haven't given up on diplomacy. So you've got someone who's complicit in inciting genocide, who is the head of a state committing genocide, openly committing genocide, self-documenting it, and you literally welcome them to your house and say that this is diplomacy. So it's taking us all for idiots. So in that atmosphere, the UK has not taken a strong line on the legitimacy of these bodies. And unfortunately, unless countries do take a strong line on these bodies will issue arrest warrants and they won't be very meaningful. And so, again, all eyes are on these European countries and their sensitivity to these legal questions. Now, the kind of the silver lining to all of this is that these countries have often signed up to these conventions and they do have their own internal legal mechanisms and pressures that make the office holders that they ultimately should be sensitive to these questions. I think the UK is taking a very liberal approach to this. It's taken groups to court to say, no, it's not genocide. No, we don't have evidence of war crimes, and this sort of stance. No, we haven't given up on diplomacy and this sort of stance. But I think we will start to see the cogs moving on this, and we'll start to see that they're ever sensitive to it. I'll give you an example. You'll see Declassified UK have been tracking they've been tracking the overflights over Gaza, which the UK says are there to help hostage recovery. And I mean, most of the hostages have been killed by Israel by this point. So, I mean, no one believes that. But obviously, they are sensitive to this issue of complicity because what have they done? They've now outsourced it to US contractors doing the flights for them. And of course, the US has said that, they'll basically bomb The Hague before any US head of state is dragged there. So that's where we're at with those sorts of measures. What we will see with the, for example, domestic situation in the UK, as I mentioned, most of these Labour politicians seem to be friends of Israel. But what we'll see, the cogs turning, the Labour conference is over, but the Labour membership want recognition of genocide. They want proper measures taken from the Labour government to stop this supporting of Israel. So we may see, of course, the Labour government will resist that as much as possible, as long as possible. But if we start to see, for example, the Unison trade union in the UK, if we start to see them say, oh, we're going to defund Labour, we may start to see some movement on that in the UK. We may start to see more of a receptivity to the Genocide Convention. And it may be that we get clearer stances from, for example, the UK about, well, no, Netanyahu couldn't come here because he would be arrested if he did.
Yeah, Declassified UK is doing tremendous work. And another thing to see is that these controversial judges getting into the top ranks like Julius Sabatinda, these type of things, which needs to be looked at.